Number 10. Cyclops and Emma Frost. Cyclops and Emma Frost are a couple that a lot of people love together and wholeheartedly ship. And you know what? I get why. Although when I started working here years ago, I myself was very pro Jean and Psych and anti Emma and Psych. Over time, I too have come around to 1. Loving Emma, and 2. Loving Scott and Emma together. However, that doesn't mean that when they got together following Jean's death and made out on her grave, it wasn't weird as all heck. Why was it weird? Well, because Jean had just died, and because up until this point Cyclops and Emma's relationship was kind of in like a weird limbo period, and this was one of the things that cemented it, which feels really weird. However, Jean's Force Ghost, or rather Jean in astral form, had sent a message to Scott to give him her blessing for him to move on with Emma, you know, to live. Or I guess maybe it was Jean in the white hot room. Is that what that's called? The white hot room? I'm pretty sure. Hence why these two made out on Jean's grave and seemingly felt pretty fine about it. And sure, Jean may have also been fine with it, as she did give her blessing, but that doesn't get rid of the weirdness of making out on a gravestone. Especially the weirdness of making out on a gravestone that belongs to a dead friend, dead lover, and in Emma's case a dead rival and former enemy. Number 9. She-Hulk and Iron Man. She-Hulk and Iron Man ending up together doesn't sound so weird on paper. Both are generally known for being avid daters in the Marvel Universe and having a long list of partners and one-night stands. And ex-partners. They got long lists. However, in this case, it did somehow feel kind of weird. Maybe it had to do with the fact that it was on the down low and they weren't so much dating as just hooking up. Or maybe it was the fact that they were just hooking up and Tony was also She-Hulk's boss at the time. Either way, this is a relationship that I could see working out, but that in actuality turned out to be pretty weird in the comics. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving this list and you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, be sure to show us that you love us by heading on over to our newer channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime, and giving it a subscribe. We're going to be doing lots of cool anime content on there, and we want you to watch it. Number 8. Black Canary and Batman. Probably one of the weirdest dates of all time was one that happened between Black Canary and Batman. If you can even call it a date. It wasn't really a date, but we're gonna call it a date for the sake of this list that I can tell you about it. In a former main continuity, these two were actually almost together for a very brief moment in time when Black Canary found herself caught in a weird love triangle stuck between Batman and Green Arrow. However, in the Earth 31 All-Star reality, these two actually hook up after beating up some criminals together. Nothing says romance like a Molotov cocktail and setting people on fire. Number 7. Rogue and Magneto. Rogue and Magneto might seem like an awkward pairing, but you know, they actually kind of work okay together. In fact, they work so well together that in the Age of Apocalypse reality, they end up married and even have a child together. Rogue and Magneto in the main continuity developed a close connection during their adventure on the Savage Lands, but it was cut short when their time together ended. Magneto was forced to choose between the life that he'd known and Rogue, but he felt as though it would not actually be possible for them to be together. He felt like there was too many conflicting things, so he decided to, you know, not be with Rogue. Although unspecified really in the comics, there is likely a huge age difference there, but Magneto is one of the few people who can touch Rogue in the comics, thanks to his very small magnetic force field, which exists all around and very close to his body. When I say small, I mean it's not like force field out here, it's like very tight to his body. So he can seemingly touch people, but not really because he's got the force field. Comics. It's a real explanation. Number 6. Batman and Cheetah. Batman and Cheetah got together almost in the DC animated universe. They didn't so much get together and go on a date as kind of just flirt with one another though, while Batman was tied up, and allude to the potential chemistry that could be between them if they did choose to date each other. Admittedly, Batman was likely just flirting with Cheetah to manipulate the villain and get himself free, as he was, you know, kind of kidnapped and held at the time. But regardless, it did seem like sparks could fly between these two, even if Batman didn't need to use his sense of compassion and charm to get free. Part of that may actually have been genuine too. And the two did share a kiss while Batman was in captivity. Although, I don't know, captivity kisses, I don't know if they count. Did look consensual though, so I think it was a willing kiss. Number 5. Rogue and Sentry. Rogue and the Sentry are a couple who never dated on panel. Rather, we found out during the Sentry's funeral that these two were even an item, which is already kinda awkward. Why is the rest of it awkward? Well, 1, because Rogue burst into tears over their relationship and the death of Robert Reynolds at said gathering and said funeral, but 2, also because I'm pretty sure Bob would have been married when he got together with Rogue. I might be wrong with this one, but I'm pretty sure he would have been, as far as I know. Sentry is famously married to Lindy Lee, so either this happened while the two were on a break, before they were married, or Robert just straight up cheated on Lindy with Anna Marie. Admittedly, the two got together because he was one of the few people who could apparently touch Rogue, who at the time struggled to resist harming people with her touch, as her powers were basically uncontrollable at that time. Robert, like Magneto, was one of the few people Rogue could safely touch, so kinda does make sense that they'd be together. However, I still have questions about, was the Sentry married at that time, or how does that work? Was that okay? Did Lindy know? Questions. Number 4. Green Lantern and Star Sapphire. Usually when you think of Star Sapphire and Green Lantern together, you're thinking of Carol Ferris and Hal Jordan. But did you know that Carol also dated Green Lantern Kyle Rayner? Their relationship was not only random, but also pretty painful for Hal, who has been known as the long-running off and on again partner of Star Sapphire, Carol Ferris. In fact, the two had an affection for each other back when she was his boss, before they were ever in a cosmic setting. Kyle and Carol didn't last as a couple for too long, probably because the whole idea of them dating felt really weird and random to most fans, and maybe even to them in canon, because it is weird. Number 3. Wolverine and Jean Grey. Jeannie and Wolverine have had a few awkward moments together in the main continuity. When I say a few, I mean I feel like there's a long list of awkwardness. Like the time that Jean supposedly cheated on Slim with Logan, or the time when Wolverine helped Jean to rip her dress while attempting an escape and he ripped it a little too well and a little too enthusiastically. But one of the most awkward date-related moments for me comes from the end of the world, which they both found themselves at together. This happens in a what if about Avengers vs. X-Men. In the end, not only do all of the heroes who are fighting against one another die, but also all of humanity as well. Jean Grey's Phoenix, however, returns to save Wolverine so that they can return to Earth once it is healed to start again, which seems to imply that they are getting ready to bring new life to the planet, of which they are currently the only 2 people existing on, as the ghosts of the fallen heroes look on in the background, or are, there in memory. The weird thing is that Phoenix is likely powerful enough to have just, brought them all back if she wanted. But instead, she chooses to use her power to simply let everyone die and set the scene for like kind of an Adam and Eve style date with Logan. An interesting choice, Jean. Number 2. Old Batman and Ra's al Ghul? This one comes to us from Batman Beyond, where we see an old man, Bruce Wayne, as Terry McGinnis, the new future Batman's mentor. Old Bruce at one point reconnects with an old flame, who has still kept her youth, Talia al Ghul. The problem? It isn't really Talia, but Ra's, disguised within Talia's body, who is hoping to poach Batman's bod for his own and use the Lazarus Pits to basically make Bruce's form young again. The two share a nostalgic and somewhat romantic evening before this is revealed though, and even at one point share a kiss, which I'm sure when Bruce finds out later that it's actually Ra's, he's like, oh boy. I did not want to kiss Ra's al Ghul, and yet here we are. I mean, at least Ra's was in Talia's body. No, I think that makes it worse. Number 1. Wolverine and Mary Jane. One of the most awkward dates to rule them all. This one likely happened off-panel, as we never really saw it. It involved Wolverine and Mary Jane getting together while Wolverine was actually in Peter Parker's body. So, once again, weird body swap date things. That's right, we are talking about the Ultimate Comics in this case. It was awkward because Peter only really found out about it later, and probably one of the weirdest and maybe worst ways that you could. That is, he found out that while Wolverine was in his body, he somehow found some time to put the moves on MJ, who basically asked Peter later, once he was safely back in his body, to wait till they were older before he tried to do what he attempted earlier that morning. Which obviously he's like, I wasn't me that morning. Oh my goodness. So yeah. Yikes.
Coming in at number 10, we have Don't Mess with Batman. It will always be somewhat of a mystery as to how Guy Gardner is able to hold on to his lantern ring. The dude is kind of rude and childish, but I will admit he has pulled off some pretty impressive things as a lantern. He's just not what you would expect from a member of the most renowned space cops, and there have been plenty of times when Guy has crossed the line, like when he was forced to work under Batman with the Justice League International. Guy didn't think this made any sense. Why was a dude in a bat suit telling him him what to do? Why was Guy Gardner not the one who was running the team? So Guy kept going on about how he should have been at the helm. He was whining, complaining, and insulting Batman. So Batman wanted to get everyone in order the fastest way possible and one-punched Guy Gardner. He literally knocked the dude out, a Green Lantern in one shot. So if Guy had any questions about who should be in charge, they would have all been answered as soon as he woke up and put his nose back in place. This was hero on hero, but for Guy this was still pretty damn embarrassing to get floored from one shot. Coming in at number 9, we have the Lantern Club. I mean, if I was a villain with super strength, I would have done the same move. It's really killing two birds with one stone, or two supers with one super. If you flip open the comic Countdown to Crisis issue 3, you will see two heroes squaring off against one villain. In the hero's corner, you have Troya and Hal Jordan, a powerful team up that would normally come out victorious. And in the villain's corner, we have Mary Marvel, a villain that sounds like she should be in a straight-to-DVD Christmas special, but in this encounter, she showed that she's no slouch. When she takes on the two do-gooders, she quickly knocks down Troya and then snags Hal by his ankle and then proceeds to beat Troya with Hal using the lantern like a club. And just like that, you have both of them bloodied and beaten. Really, that was the most effective way to get the job done. Coming in at number 8, we have Spider-Man versus the Spot. The Spot will go down as one of the worst Spider-Man villains ever, but that doesn't mean that he wasn't able to get one over on Spidey. For those of you who don't know, the Spot is a villain that is covered with small portals all over his body. Think of him as the game portal, where you go in one portal and you come out the other, even if it defies the laws of physics. In their encounter, Spider-Man tries to punch the Spot and ends up clocking himself in the face. It was like a grade school bully going, "Stop hitting yourself. Stop hitting yourself." Coming in at number 7, we have Pants Punched and KO'd. Not all supers come from Marvel and DC, so when I get a chance, I like to sneak in some moments from outside the superhero norms. For this one, we're gonna head into the world of anime to one of my favorite shows, My Hero Academia. In season 1, we have the Sports Festival, where new promising heroes go up against each other for the entertainment of the people. In this tournament, we see Aoyama, who has a belly laser power similar to Cyclops, but it comes out of his stomach. He goes up against Ashido, who has acid powers. The two square off in a short scrap that ends with Ashido blasting Aoyama's belt line with acid. This causes his pants to fall down, and Ashido slides in and uppercuts him unconscious. So getting knocked out while you're scrambling to pull up your pants, yeah, that's one of the worst ways to go out. Coming in at number 6, we have Packing on the Pounds. You only have to look at comic books for about 4 seconds to get enough unrealistic body standards to give an entire generation of people body dysmorphia. So when one hero puts on enough pounds that he couldn't even use his powers, that really sticks out, especially when your power is how fast you can move. I mean, if this was to happen to the Blob, I don't think anyone would notice. Being big is kind of his thing. Who were we talking about? Well, of course, the Flash. When we zoom back to the Silver Age of comics, we find an issue when one of the Flash's arch enemies, Gorilla Grodd, comes up with a plan to stop the speedster from running, and it's simple but effective. He makes him get so fat that he can't use his powers anymore. Grodd zaps the Flash with a ray that makes him retain water without him knowing. This made him bulk up until he literally weighed a ton. It would be pretty embarrassing to go from the fastest man alive to the star of My 600-Pound Life. Coming in at number 5, we have Wolverine Gets a Girl's Touch. Known for being one of the coolest characters in the Marvel Universe, it must have hurt to have his body tossed through building after building from one shot from a 12-year-old girl. In issue 12 of The Runaways, Wolverine is hot on the tail of Cloak. He eventually tracks down Cloak, and lo and behold, he's being protected by Molly Hayes, aka Princess Powerful. He tries to negotiate, but things turn violent pretty quickly. Downside for Logan is that Molly is probably one of the strongest mutants ever, and with one touch he's fired out of there like a snot rocket in the shower. Getting beat up by a girl must have not been the easiest emotional scar to get rid of. Coming at number 4, we have the Yellow Room. Lanterns are very particular about colors. Some are good, some are bad, and there's a spectrum, blah 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 blah. While in All-Star Batman and Robin, we see Hal Jordan get pranked, triggered, and beat up by his least favorite color, yellow. Batman is going out of his way to mess with Hal Jordan, decides to explore his artistic side and paint a room yellow. That's quite the statement. This of course sets Hal off when he walks in, but I don't think he was ready for what was about to happen next. A young Robin slips in and manages to pickpocket Hal's ring right off his finger, and then the teenager whoops his ass. Losing your ring, getting humiliated in a yellow room, and getting KO'd by a teenager, that is a rough one. Coming in at number 3, we have Superman is trusting and dumb. Not how you would think to describe the Man of Steel, but when you hear how Lex Luthor was able to trick him, you'll be on my side. There was a comic where Superman is approached by a tailor, a guy who seemed to be a kind fellow who just wanted to do a good deed for the man who keeps the city safe. You can tell that this is an older comic. When was the last time a tailor approached you randomly and offered to make you a suit? Well, this mystery man offers to give the Man of Steel a brand new suit that will freshen up his image. Superman thinks this is amazing and accepts. The tailor makes him this suit, and without questioning anything, he puts it on. I think this might have been a case of superhero privilege. You think that you should be getting gifts from strangers at any time of the day. Well, it turns out this generous tailor was actually Lex Luthor in disguise. You think the world's greatest hero would be on the watch for the one person who's trying to kill him 24/7, but I guess he let this one slip. Oh, and there's more. Lex Luthor planted a trap in the suit. He sewed a lead-covered clump of kryptonite into the suit, which Superman never noticed. He didn't take the half second to look at the suit with his X-ray vision. Nope, there's literally a bomb in his clothes that will expose him to his weakness at the worst moment, and it was given to him in person by his arch-enemy. Lex Luthor would have had to put Superman through a whole fitting process, and he still didn't pick up on it. Coming in at number 2, we have Tin Can Iron Man. As time goes on, we have seen heroes and villains become more intricate. The way that they fight, how they can be beaten, how they use their powers. For the most part, all of these things have become more exciting. But when some heroes were originally crafted, they didn't have such interesting pieces to them. For this slip up, let's head all the way back to Avengers number 2. In this issue, the team of Earth's mightiest heroes has an enemy they never thought they would have to face, themselves. Well, kinda. See, they take on Space Phantom. This is a villain who can copy any form exactly. There's literally nothing off about his imitations, and this was his plan to beat the Avengers by turning them on each other. This was Civil War before Civil War. At first the Avengers are fooled, but then they learn his tricks, and while the Space Phantom is a perfect imitation of Iron Man, Thor is able to stop him by making it rain. And not in the cool way, he didn't throw a stack of cash in his face. Literally, rain comes down and it rusts the perfect imitation of Iron Man so he can't move. I know some of you at home are going to complain because it was Space Phantom that was beaten and not Iron Man, but it was a perfect imitation of Iron Man, meaning that Iron Man could have also be beaten by rust, which is one of the most embarrassing things that Iron Man could have learned about himself. And coming in at the number 1 spot, we have the Justice League losing to Killer Frost. There's no shortage of villains that have ice powers. When it comes to Killer Frost, she's okay. She's never really had a moment to shine. She isn't really a villain that any S-tier hero would even bother with. She would be happy to see Elastic Man show up to fight her. But there was one time when her and the Suicide Squad were taking on the Boy in Blue, and Enchantress was able to smash Superman so hard he was laying on the ground immobilized. Soup has always had trouble with magic users. Well, Killer Frost was there and saw this as a golden opportunity. She used her powers to suck Superman's energy dry, draining him of his life force and his powers. She then flew off and took out the entire Justice League. Now, while it being hard for anyone from the League to take down someone that powerful, the fact that they let someone like Killer Frost get the drop on them, that is pretty embarrassing. This is one of the biggest upsets in comic book history.
And at number 10, organic webs. Tobey Maguire's iteration of Spider-Man was extremely accurate to the comic source material, but one of the few differences between the two was his version of Spider-Man's web shooters. For most of Spider-Man's nearly 60 years of existence in comic books and various adaptations, the superhero used a pair of wrist-mounted shooters that shoot a synthetic web-like fluid. While most Spider-Man adaptations retain the iconic mechanical web shooters, Sam Raimi's Spider-Man trilogy opted to give its version of Peter Parker the power to generate webbing from his body. When you really think about it, it is really gross. It was even a joke made in the latest Spider-Man movie when the Andrew Garfield and Tom Holland versions of the characters are flabbergasted and slightly grossed out by Tobey Maguire's organic sticky spider webbing that came propelling out of this weird scar on his wrist. Maybe I'm weird, but I kinda like the organic webbing? I don't know, maybe because I grew up on the Raimi films, it felt right, and the reason for Raimi doing it makes sense to me. I'm sorry.
Number 9, from rags to riches and back to rags again. One of the weirdest things that happened to Peter in regards to no one seemingly really acknowledging or remembering it much in the continuity is when Peter became basically a globe-trotting billionaire all his own, in a similar but distinctly different style to Iron Man's Tony Stark. Well, of course, initially it was Otto and Peter's body who created Parker Industries and made it a success, but still, even without Otto in the driver's seat, it makes sense when you think about it, as Peter is a brilliant man who, if he had the time and he put in the effort, could easily end up near the top of the Fortune 500. However, what is weird is that he created a global company that was extremely profitable and successful for a time, lost it, and then everyone seemingly forgot who he was. He ended up back as just poor Peter Parker, just trying to get by while playing the role of hero. And everyday folks don't seem to even recognize him as the face of a once great global company. That's pretty nuts.
Number 8. Getting beat up by the Spot. Jonathan Owen is a villain that only well-versed fans of Spider-Man would recognize, probably. As the Spot, Jonathan hasn't always been the most relevant villain of Peter Parker. He often ends up on the list of Spider-Man's worst and unknown villains. I mean, when he first confronted Spider-Man and announced his villain moniker in Peter Parker the Spectacular Spider-Man Volume 1, Issue 99 in 1985, the hero hit the ground laughing, which made it all the more embarrassing for Spider-Man when the Spot actually defeated him. Spot threw Peter in and out of his dimensions using his whole portals. He landed more than a few good punches on the hero as well. The Spot doesn't hit hard, but as he says, even the strongest of trees can be felled by sufficient strokes from even the smallest of hatchets. Yeah, he said that. Eventually, he left Peter discombobulated, with Black Cat having to help him back to his feet, and he got his own back eventually, but that's not important.
Number 7. Everyone loves MJ. An awkward moment in the Ultimate Spider-Man universe comes courtesy of Ultimate Peter Parker getting his own version of the Clone Saga. Except here, instead of Ben Reilly and Kane Parker, we got Kane Parker and Jessica Drew. That's right, in the Ultimate universe, Jessica Drew is actually a female clone of Peter Parker. There were some other clones too, just for those of you that are like, you didn't mention all the other clones. But yes, I know about them. They exist. And even more intriguing and also kind of sad in this reality, Jessica and all the other clones have all of Peter's memories, which leads to pretty much all of them having a huge crush on MJ. Jessica included. Although in an even stranger twist, despite also being in love with Mary Jane, or seemingly being in love with Mary Jane, instead of Jessica ending up as a lesbian in this portrayal of her character as a result of sharing Peter's memories and feelings, it is implied that she actually ends up dating Johnny Storm, albeit possibly briefly. Although I think that also could say something about the potential for the close relationship that Johnny and Peter have in the comics, so maybe that's what that's about.
Number 6. Spider-Man and Silk getting busy on the ceiling. Cindy Moon, first revealed in the Amazing Spider-Man #1 from 2014, was a girl who on the same day was also bitten by the exact same spider that gave Peter Parker his powers. Now fast forward to the 4th issue of that comic, and Peter learns of her existence and the place she was being kept safe. He releases her and joins her as she goes off into the world. Now it took about 5 or 6 pages before it was revealed that these two young spider heroes release pheromones that make them irresistibly attracted to one another, and they nearly immediately start going at it. Mid-argument. They go at it so much so that it carries on into the next issue when he and Cindy Moon are on the ceiling of the apartment that Peter shares with his roommate Anna Maria Marconi. So of course Anna Maria walks in on the two spider freaks sparsely clothed and unable to control themselves. Not an ideal situation.
Number 5. Aunt May forgets to knock. Speaking on people walking in on people. Later on in their comic book history, MJ and Peter wouldn't just be friends or even dating, they would actually end up married for quite a long while. However, just because they were married didn't mean that Aunt May always remembered to respect their privacy and knock when they were alone together in a bedroom. Case in point in Web of Spider-Man issue number 50, when she decides to bring them up some warm hot cocoa to warm their bones on a cold winter's night, only to find out that they are already busy warming their bones.
Number 4. Miles getting Gwen's hair stuck on his hand. If you haven't seen the totally awesome and award-winning animated Into the Spider-Verse film, well, pause this video and go do that and then come back. But if you have, then you surely remember the scene not too long after Miles Morales discovers he has powers and winds up in an extremely embarrassing situation with Gwen Stacy, his crush. You see, Miles' uncle told him to try this totally slick move on his crush where he puts his hand on her shoulder and be like, "Hey." Which, I don't know where you go after you say the hey thing. It kind of feels like terrible advice, and I think it was because Miles just did it in the middle of a conversation and made it really bad. But then, Thanks to his new powers, when he goes to remove his hand, he accidentally gets stuck to her hair. The next 30 seconds sees him accidentally pull her in close, get stuck to her textbook, spin around, blame it on puberty, and then get catapulted by her, all in front of other students. She ends up getting half her hair buzzed off, which, hey, it's an experience neither of them will forget. Maybe when they're married they'll laugh about it, I don't know, maybe not.
Number 3, Spider-Man loses control. One of the most awkward moments in terms of just what went down has to be when Spider-Man accidentally hits MJ when she's trying to get between Peter and his clone Ben Reilly to stop them from fighting one another. Oddly enough, I was remembering a thing where this also appeared. Even though this moment was very different in terms of what caused it to happen, a very similar incident also is incorporated into the original Sam Raimi Spider-Man film franchise. In this case, MJ tries to stop Peter from beating up on a bouncer at the nightclub that she works at. In the comics, Peter and Ben both go to run some tests to figure out who is the clone and who is the original between them, when Peter learns that Ben is supposedly the original, and he freaks out. He begins wailing on Ben, and Mary Jane breaks free to attempt to break up the fight, calling out to her husband, "Stop it, Peter, for the love of God! Stop, you're killing him!" Instinctively, Peter goes to push MJ back, telling her to get away and leave him alone, and he strikes her, sending her flying with his super strength, only for him to realize what he's done almost immediately, condemning his own behavior before running away. In Spider-Man 3, it goes down similarly, with Peter running away even following this encounter, and MJ calling out, "Peter, stop it," which is also very similar.
Number 2, Spiderweb underwear. In The Amazing Spider-Man from 2014, after Spider-Man had a bit of a body swap with a certain villain, he got into a fight that had all of his costume, minus his mask, zapped off. Like, all of it, down to his birthday suit. As a quick solution to the problem, Spider-Man decided to use his webbing to cover up his privates as an honestly genius decision. Well, it would have been genius, but see, Peter didn't realize that the villain he mind swapped with actually improved his webbing so it now lasts much longer, which meant Peter now had some permanent underwear for a while. So not only did Spider-Man have a costume consisting of a mask and web undies that was seen all over live television, prompting many characters to laugh at him, and even gave Jessica Drew a clue that this was Peter Parker back in his body again, he also had to explain this whole thing in one long monologue to Captain America of all people. Oh, Peter, you never cease to amaze.
Number 1, trapped in Dr. Octopus's mind. At one point in the comics, we get the awesome weirdness that is Superior Spider-Man, which is basically when Otto Octavius, aka Dr. Octopus, takes hold of Spider-Man's body. However, this happens as the result of a body swap, which Peter is tricked into, which means that Peter Parker, aka Spider-Man, has his consciousness end up in the failing body of Otto Octavius, who at that time was dying. While trapped in Otto's mind, Peter ends up reliving some of Otto's memories, namely an extremely intimate and weirdly romantic moment that happened between Otto and Aunt May when the two were engaged to be married. Although they never ended up married, apparently they still sealed the deal, if you know what I mean. Which means that Peter got a front row seat to an intimate interaction that he'd rather have never known happened. And you know, he's in Otto's body in that memory, so. Number 10, Rogue and Deadpool. These two are people who both have a lot of weird dates. At one point, Deadpool and Rogue had a team up that ended up in a kiss. The super strange part of it was that Rogue kissing Deadpool caused her to absorb some of his powers, which also caused her skin to temporarily resemble, well, Deadpool's skin. Not like his actual face, but just, you know how his skin's all, you know what I'm talking about. It's kinda nasty. Deadpool himself felt embarrassed about the whole thing. As much as he was into Rogue, he felt they could never be together because of all the trauma he carried with him in his mind and how he messed everything up. But Rogue just kissed him again, took a closer look inside his mind, and while at first she was somewhat taken aback admittedly, after a breath she said that after the Red Skull, having weight in her mind was basically a palate cleanser. And the two continued to smooch for a while longer. Even more awkward later, when Gambit and Rogue were back together, Gambit would actually bring up this makeout sesh, seemingly a bit jealous. What do you think makes a superhero date awkward? Do you think it's an interruption, weird pairings, or, you know, something else? Let us know your thoughts on it in the comments below. Number 9, Green Lantern and Jillian Pearlman. This date got pretty awkward pretty quickly when Sapphire crashed it. At the time, Hal Jordan, aka Green Lantern was on a date with Jillian Pearlman, when Star Sapphire arrived attempting to steal him away. This Star Sapphire was none other than Hal's old flame, Carol Ferris. Seeing that she was possessed by the power of Star Sapphire, Hal attempted to free Carol and succeeded, but at the cost of Jillian, who found herself next possessed by the power of the Star Sapphires, also awkwardly becoming one herself, and then calling herself Yummy. It was weird. It was weird. It was a weird time. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you love what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, you need to check out our newest channel, Most Amazing Top 10 Anime. Head on over, hit that subscribe button, make sure those bell notifications are on because you're not going to want to miss it. Number 8. Deadpool and Outlaw. In a weird turn of events, what turned into a long awkward time with Outlaw kind of ended up as like a nice, raunchy, and actually kinda sweet date, I guess, in the end. In typical Deadpool fashion, really. For those who don't know Outlaw, she's a mutant whose real name is Inez Temple. She's worked as a bodyguard for Dazzler before and is also a good friend of Deadpool's. At one point, the two even ended up married. After Deadpool called on Outlaw for some help after being shot, he sought refuge in her place, but accidentally wrecked her apartment as he was found out and, well, you know, attacked there. To make things right, by the end of the Deadpool Suicide Kings miniseries, Deadpool bought Outlaw a new pad and new furniture. That's right, he bought her a whole new apartment. That's so nice. She thanked him, and because she too cared for him and thought what he had done for her was like super sweet, decided to show her appreciation intimately. Think that's all I can really say. I'll let the panels speak for themselves. Number 7. Starfire and Nightwing. Starfire and Nightwing once had a pretty awkward moment on a date when Barbara Gordon showed up. Lots of awkward moments involving this little love triangle for sure. It was a date that Nightwing, aka Dick Grayson, only learned was awkward years later. Babs at one point showed up to Dick's place with flowers and chocolates likely for him, only to have the door answered by a half-dressed Corey. Babs introduced herself, kind of, but she couldn't really bring herself to stay. Too sad to know that she'd already lost Nightwing. Corey never told Dick that Barbara Gordon had been the one at the door, likely sensing that Barbara, you know, needed some time and needed some space. I don't think this was Starfire trying to be mean, I think this was Starfire trying to be considerate in a way. I think that also may have been considered these two women's first meeting in canon, at least at that time anyways. Not sure if it's still considered that, but at the time, pretty sure it was. Number 6. She-Hulk and Thor. She-Hulk and Thor have dated in the past, and while not everyone was a big fan of the couple, the two have had some memorable moments together during their time serving on the Avengers, while also seeing one another. Things can get awkward when you date someone who you also work with, especially when you're around your other teammates and coworkers. There's a lot of potential for things to get weird. In this case, we're talking about the awkwardness of the Avengers team and their reaction to the sometimes oddly intimate moments that, of course, they witnessed. Case in point, when the Avengers all decide to go hot tubbing together and She-Hulk decides to join them in the buff. Now admittedly, a lot of other people were in the buff, but She-Hulk was really in the buff, standing there in all of her green glory. Thor was very happy to see She-Hulk, as was seemingly Tony, while also feeling a little shocked, but pretty much everyone else was just kind of both like shocked and embarrassed at She-Hulk's boldness. It was an awkward but also kind of cute and funny moment overall. I like that Carol was like trying to cover up Ghost Rider's eyes. She's like, don't look. Number 5. Donna Troy and Terry Long. While She-Hulk and Thor might seem like a super logical pairing, how about Donna Troy and Terry Long? I feel like one of the most illogical things that we've ever done. They were definitely objectively odd together, I would say, and yet they didn't only date. They got full-on married. Despite the fact that Terry was seemingly years older than Donna, constantly flirting with her friend and teammate Starfire, and used to be Donna's professor. Yeah. Can you spell problematic? I'm pretty sure you can just spell it with Donna Troy and Terry Long. Or I mean, I guess Donna Long as she became for a while. I think she kept her name though. Donna Long would be a terrible name, would it not? The relationship would actually go on for quite some time, but eventually even DC realized some of the problems with these two being together. Terry and Donna would have a child together, but later separate, before Terry and their son Robert, as well as his daughter from a previous marriage, Jennifer, were actually killed in a car crash. The really bizarre part was that Terry actually was the one who actually actively sought to separate from Donna, deeming her too dangerous to be around, and even got a restraining order against her, which is weird. You'd think it would be the other way, but no, Terry was the one that was like, we definitely need to get divorced and I definitely need a restraining order because you dangerous, because you're superhero life. If you're worried about danger, I feel like don't marry a superhero. Just a suggestion to people. Number 4, Miss Marvel and Vision. This one is mainly awkward because it's an awkward pairing. To be clear, when we're talking about Miss Marvel here, we're actually not talking about Kamala Khan, but instead we're talking about Carol Danvers, back when she was known by that hero mantle, Miss Marvel, before she gave the name to Kamala. While Vision is often associated with Scarlet Witch in regards to romance, after the two went their separate ways but were both Avengers, Viz decided to try his hand at dating himself. Wanda at this point had moved on with Wonder Man, and when Vision asked Carol out, I think everyone, readers included, were a little shocked. Carol also was surprised, but after making sure it was fine with Wanda, agreed to the date. The date they went on seemed to be going quite well, but it was interrupted by an emergency call to action, and despite it being a seemingly successful date where both of them had fun, the two never really dated again, as far as we know. If they did date, I think it was off panel because I can't think of any other ones. It's awkward when you have a really good date and then you're like, let's just never see each other again. This was fun, but like, I'll see you on the team, that's it. I don't know, maybe Carol isn't into like android beings or something. Maybe that's what she realized on that date. She was like, I like Viz, but like as a friend. Number 3, Ice and Green Lantern. So initially, Ice and Green Lantern got along pretty well, but then everything changed. Namely, Guy Gardner returned to the man that he'd always been, which meant that Ice didn't actually like him so much anymore. You see, Fire and Ice joined the Justice League of America after Guy Gardner, aka Green Lantern, had suffered from some head trauma that actually caused him to become a lot more cool, calm, collected. He was sweet, he was kind, and that's how the two always knew him. Eventually, however, his true personality would return and take over, and that was when he tricked Ice into going out on a date with him. Kinda like challenging her to do it basically, and she was like, fine, I'll go out on a date with you, we'll see. We'll see if you're actually nice or not. Where did Guy take her, by the way? A theater that shows adult films. Yeah, I think you can imagine how it went. Not so good. Ice was like, what is this? You really are a jerk, Guy Gardner. He's like, well, I am who I am. Gotta give Guy that, at least he is who he is and he doesn't really apologize for it. For better or for worse. Number 2, Nightcrawler and Amanda Sefton. Although we now know her as Amanda Sefton more commonly, originally Amanda was known as Jermaine Zardos. As a Nightcrawler fan, you may already know the significance of this name, but for those who don't, allow me to explain. Nightcrawler is the son of Azazel and Mystique, but they both dipped pretty early on in his life. Abandoned, Nightcrawler was found and taken in by Margali, a sorceress. Margali had 2 children when she took in Kurt, one of which was Jermaine. That's right, Margali Zardos is Nightcrawler's adopted mother, making Jermaine his adopted sister. Oh boy. Eventually, Kurt Zardos left his family, became Kurt Wagner, and joined the X-Men. But Jermaine was curious about his leaving and his potential involvement in their brother's death, so she decided to change her name to Amanda Sefton, followed him, and then surprisingly ended up dating him? The really awkward part is that after Kurt kind of figured out that Amanda was actually Jermaine, he still decided to keep dating her. I mean, they wouldn't stay together forever, but it's weird, right? Number 1, Batman and Talia al Ghul. Batman and Talia al Ghul. Some people love them, some people think they're toxic together, some people hate them. I mean, even the moments when I do love them, I personally still think they're pretty toxic together, so yeah. I mean, granted, a lot of superhero relationships are somewhat toxic. Let's just acknowledge that. I also consider these two to be toxic even without considering or, focusing on the fact that Talia in canon forced herself on Bruce, and basically that's how she got and we got Damian Wayne. Yeesh. These two have had plenty of awkward dates, and let's not forget the time they were basically married in secret as well, which also is just a whole kind of weird. I mean, it's just weird. That was a whole weird thing. Really, everything is weird with Batman and Talia. Perhaps that's also part of the reason why people love them together though too? I don't know. I don't really see it. I'm personally very pro Batman and Catwoman. Batman and Talia, I'm like, I think there's too many things that have happened where we just need to be like, no, don't do it. Number 10, Magma and Mephisto. It's weird that this one is one of the least awkward dates that's on this list, but really, it is. Magma and Mephisto dated after the New Mutants accidentally got transported to a hell dimension dimension instead of the more specific Hela's hell. As such, Mephisto made a deal to transport them out of his hell dimension where they ended up and into hell with one L in exchange for a date with Amara, aka Magma. Amara accepted the terms and the New Mutants were successfully transported to their destination. Later, the date with Mephisto started off awkwardly as he took her to the third circle of hell and really tried too hard to romance her. However, after Amara called him out on this and Mephisto revealed his sincere intention to simply have a nice, normal evening and be treated as a normal person, the two went out to a restaurant on Earth. Mephisto even got a goodnight's kiss from Magma at the end of the night, who later agreed to see him again. Number 9. Batman and Wonder Woman. Batman and Wonder Woman have ended up together in the comics before, but they also have lived infinite lives together through Wonder Woman's dreams. When they shared a kiss in the main continuity, it left the two of them wondering if they should be together or not. Before they ultimately made the choice on whether or not to take the plunge, Wonder Woman decided to hook herself up to Martian Manhunter's trans-consciousness articulator, which showed her what kind of potential their life together might hold, at least as far as her own mind saw in regards to possibilities. Although a lot of it was sweet, there was also a lot of dark moments that Wonder Woman saw. In the end, Batman came to her to talk as she woke up and finished her time in the trans-consciousness articulator. The two awkwardly then agreed to stay friends, despite it being obvious that they both perhaps are interested in more. Awkward. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you are loving what we do here at Top 10 Nerd, please head on over to our newest channel, Top 10 Anime, and check them out where we're going to be talking about cool anime stuff and manga, all the good things. La la la. Number 8. Spider-Man and Captain Marvel. Spider-Man and Captain Marvel may have had the most traditionally awkward date in Marvel history. Carol and Spider-Man had flirted a bit during their time working together, but at one point Spider-Man basically made a deal with Carol to help her in exchange for a date. He was kind of joking, but she ended up accepting, and so they went on this date. The date was extremely awkward just because both Peter and Carol were putting on personas the whole time, going out to a fancy place when they kind of just both wanted to chill and like grab some fast food. Fortunately, some crime intervened and they were able to round out the end of the night with chili dogs on a rooftop after, dealing with the crime, revealing that for both of them this was really the ideal date. Number 7. Squirrel Girl and Wolverine. Although we never saw the dating on panel, in my mind I feel like it would be super awkward. So based on my own headcanon, my own imaginings of the implied relationship between these two, I'm including them together as a point. Why is the relationship between them weird for me? Well, aside from the age difference, which many of you have dismissed here on Nerd in the comments whenever I talk about Wolverine, which is fair enough, bub. At this point it is very hard for Wolverine, at least while on Earth, to find someone to date who is close to his own age, because yeah, he ancient. It's just weird though because these two are so very different. Doreen is like a ray of sunshine with a big glass of friendship on the side, and Wolverine is like an old grumpy loner. However, maybe Doreen was able to bring out a side of Logan that we don't normally see. Even if this was the case though, those dates still sound like they would be awkward as heck to me to read, though I kinda really want to read them. It was apparently clarified in the letters page of Unbeatable Squirrel Girl issue number 2 that Wolverine and Squirrel Girl never had a romantic relationship. But based on how they were written together in New Avengers and Wolverine's potential feelings for her as revealed in his own series, I'm not sure I buy it. Also, it's different writers, so every writer can have their own canon about a character, but doesn't always stay true when somebody else is writing. You know what I mean? Number 6. Stargirl and Shazam. Stargirl and Shazam dated for a time, and although it wasn't awkward necessarily for them, well, it did get awkward for them, but it wasn't awkward for them to start. It was awkward for heroes who knew them, but who also didn't know the secret identity of Shazam. You see, Shazam is actually Billy Batson, who is like a teenage kid, like Stargirl. But when he transforms, he appears as the grown man, Shazam. Forced to choose between Stargirl or his secret identity, Billy ultimately chose to keep the truth that he was a child in a man's body as Shazam a secret, which ultimately cost Stargirl and Shazam their relationship, as it was too awkward for everyone else to be talking about the apparent scandal that was their relationship. Because, Shazam's an adult and Stargirl's a teenager, so People were like, that's not good. Number 5, Silk and Spider-Man. The whole idea of Silk and Spider-Man as a couple is really awkward. One of the most awkward romantic times they had together was when Peter's roommate Anna walked in on them together while they were on the roof getting busy. The two heroes were bit by the same radioactive spider, which initially in the canon made them obsessively lustful for one another. They literally couldn't turn it off, and prisoners of their own pheromones were forced to hang all over one another at any given opportunity, and even at some inopportune times too. Fortunately, this isn't a thing anymore, but for a time it made their whole dynamic really weird. Number 4, Storm and Doctor Doom. Is there anything more awkward than when your dinner host, after wining and dining you, leans in to encase you in a chrome metal cast? No, I don't think there's anything more awkward than that. Despite the fact that their weird sort of forced dinner date was going well in issue 145 of Uncanny X-Men, Doom decided to ruin it by encasing Storm in chrome. Needless to say, this turn of events on their accidental kind of weird date thing didn't turn out too well for Storm or for Doom either. Storm ends up furious at her predicament, and due to claustrophobia, which she suffered from at the time, created a massive storm that plagued the Earth. Fortunately, once she was out of her casing, the X-Men were able to calm her down somewhat, and disaster was averted. And Storm even let Doom mostly off the hook for that one after he apologized and claimed he wanted a fresh start with her. Number 3, Superman and Big Barda. I suppose we wouldn't technically call this a date, so much as a team up turned sour. This all went down in Action Comics issue 592 to 593, and although it isn't technically a date, it's still really weird and awkward, so I'm including it. Here we meet an old villain from Apocalypse. So old, in fact, not even Big Barda remembers him. His name is Sleaze, and he has a plan to get revenge on Darkseid, who banished him from Apocalypse, and to forge his own army. He plans to use Big Barda's Mega Rod to mind control both her and Superman into making a certain intimate kind of tape that I can't say on YouTube, but you know what I'm talking about. Superman came to her rescue, you see, but when Barda was ready to kill Sleaze for taking control of her for the last 2 days, Superman attempted to stop her because he's Superman, and he's like, you can't just kill people, Barda. No! This caused Barda to think that Superman was somehow being controlled by Sleaze, which allowed Sleaze to actually take control of both Superman and Barda once the two turned on one another. Sleaze set them up to get all steamy together in front of the camera, but fortunately, his plan to ship the two heroes intimately for the sake of the public's enjoyment, so he can get that army and make that money, was foiled by Miracle Man, who came to rescue his wife. Number 2, Green Lantern and Arisia Robb. Maybe one of the most awkward relationships in all of comic book history. Arisia Robb was initially presented as being like a younger sister figure when it came to her and Hal Jordan's relationship. In fact, I think he even at one point calls her little sister. She was also a member of the Corps, the Green Lantern Corps, but she was also kind of like a kid too. That is until she willed herself to grow up. Why did Arisia do this? Well, because she was in love with Hal and she wanted to be with him, but he refused her advances because he felt it would be wrong. After all, she was a kid, and at the time she was a teenager. He was like, this is not okay. However, his tune changed once Arisia aged herself up. Once Arisia was, all grown up, the two ended up dating, and eventually they would even live together, if you can believe that. Looking back on their relationship and date now, the awkwardness and just plain wrongness feels impossible to avoid in the context of the modern day. Number 1, Supergirl and Comet. Supergirl once dated a horse. Yep. Her own horse, Comet. Comet, however, wasn't always a horse and was once a minotaur that desired to be human. However, while Circe attempted to make his wish come true, she was tricked, and instead, the centaur named Byron was turned into a full horse instead of becoming a full human. Which is just such a Circe thing to happen, isn't it? Even though it was a mistake. Circe felt bad and gave Byron superpowers and immortality as a white horse to kind of make up for the whole turning him into a horse as opposed to a human. As a horse, Comet also became a friend and ally to Supergirl, but little did she know he was not just a horse, but a minotaur trapped in the body of a horse who wanted to be human, and who also was in love with her. When Comet was temporarily transformed into a human, rather than reveal to Supergirl his true identity when she came looking for her horse companion, he decided to take up the name of Bronco Bill Star, keep the truth of his identity a secret from her, and woo her instead. Number 10, Human Torch and Victorious. Definitely one of the most awkward moments to have happened in recent comics, I think. During Fantastic Four issue 33 at Doom's wedding to the Latvian hero Victorious, it's revealed that she actually slept with one of his enemies. Yep, you guessed it, Human Torch, aka Johnny Storm. While this is the kind of behavior we've come to kind of expect from Johnny Storm, we wouldn't expect it to have messed up everything as badly as it did, or we wouldn't have expected it on this level, I guess. The truth initially was kept a secret, but finally, up at the altar, Victorious realized her mistake in keeping it from her husband-to-be, Victor, and decided that he actually should know. Yikes, I would not have wanted to be one of the wedding guests. Ugh, would have been rough. I mean, it was rough. It became a mess really quick. Number 9. Superman and Cheetah. I know what you're probably thinking. When did this even happen? Well, it took place in a series that explores Superman's time on Earth when he was young and wild in his early 20s, before he settled into his job at the Daily Planet and ended up in love with Lois Lane. In issue number 3 of Superman American Alien, we learned that a young Clark Kent one time ended up on a yacht where Bruce Wayne's birthday was being celebrated. Of course, this was all a ruse for Bruce, who as a youngster traveled the world learning and honing his skills as a combatant and detective, so he wasn't actually there for his birthday. In fact, he wasn't actually there for pretty much any of his birthdays. As such, Clark ends up meeting a young Barbara Minerva while on the yacht. Barbara knows it's not Bruce, but still decides to have a little fun time with this mysterious stranger, and the two end up sleeping together. Barbara even encourages Clark to embrace people mistaking him for the absent Bruce, and, you know, just have a fun time. Which in the end, he does. If this strange romance bothers you, however, don't worry. It's all in good fun, as American Alien is not considered a part of the main continuity. When I found out this happened, I was like, what? But it's not part of the main continuity. It's not within the main canon. And friends, before we move on to the next spot, if you are loving this list and you want more awkward romances, well boy, do I have some more stories to tell ya. So be sure to let us know you want that list by giving this video a thumbs up. Maybe next time we'll talk about some awkward villain romances. There's some of those too. Number 8. Stargirl and Shazam. Stargirl and Shazam's relationship wasn't really awkward from their own perspective. The two heroes were both teenagers at the time, and Stargirl was aware that Shazam was really teenager Billy Batson. But it got really awkward when other heroes who didn't know of Shazam's true identity and age caught wind that the two were together. It became so awkward, in fact, that Shazam decided to break up with Courtney. Billy knew he couldn't make everyone understand without revealing his true identity, and so for that reason their relationship basically had to end. Which, yeah, that would be pretty awkward because Shazam definitely looks like an adult, so yikes, not good. Number 7. Storm and Doom. Oh man, if ever there was an awkward romance, this is definitely one of them. Although that so often is what happens when we have romances, or rather flirtations, between heroes and villains. Recently in Sword issue number 7, we saw a callback to the history between Storm and Doom. They once had a sort of impromptu date. That date, however, did not end too well, and she was trapped inside a body-tight chrome casing, aggravating her intense claustrophobia. Storm would escape this chrome prison shortly, and later would go on to heal from her claustrophobia over the coming years, but she wouldn't forget the slight that Doom had made against her. While initially she thought Doom a gentleman back then, today she is wiser. We see the topic come up again recently when Victor attempts to flirt with Aurora during a diplomatic dinner between the two, with Storm being the queen of Mars / Morocco and Doom being the ruler of Latveria. Storm quickly reminds Doom that she has not forgotten their past, to which he hastily apologizes and claims that her imprisonment was due to a malfunctioning Doombot who had acted on his behalf that evening years ago. I don't know, Doom. I don't think I'm buying it. Number 6. Starfire and Jason Todd. Starfire and Jason Todd are a weird couple for, well, a number of reasons. Fortunately, they never really went full couple and really only had an implied relationship / flirtation during their time together on the Outlaws team. Still, this pairing was super awkward considering that Starfire had no recollection of her time with Dick Grayson, but also was implied to be younger in the New 52 continuity, with her being associated with the Teen Titans. Jason is, I believe, only a few years younger than Nightwing, which also makes everything kind of weird between Jason, Nightwing, and Starfire, because it's kind of also perhaps unintentionally implied that she would be a lot younger than both of them, and yet even in this continuity I believe she and Dick were still almost married. that still happened, I think. There's also the whole thing between Starfire just seemingly being interested in sleeping with Jason, and then pretty much immediately after actually sleeping with Roy Harper, aka Arsenal. Number 5. Archangel and Tuesday Bird. I don't know if you have read the Archangel one-shot Phantom Wings, but if you haven't, you need to go do so. It is a treat. If you like weird things, you should read it. In this comic, Archangel ends up trapped in what appears to be some kind of pocket or nightmare dimension. In reality, it's being created and manipulated by a mutant who we learn is named Tuesday Bird. No, I'm not kidding, that's her name. Tuesday seems to possess the power to manipulate birds, and we learn that the trauma she suffered is actually causing them to repeatedly attack her. In the end, Warren and Tuesday end up with a weird attraction to one another, where Tuesday simultaneously finds him both beautiful and disgusting due to him looking like a bird because he's got wings, you know? And Warren wrestles with his own issues regarding losing his wings, his transformance into Archangel, and his feelings about his new techno-organic wings. At night, she secretly anoints his wings with oil while he sleeps. It's very weird, it's very creepy, it's very sensual. I don't want to spoil it for those who want to go back and revisit this one, but I'll just say it ends on an even weirder note, if you can even imagine that. Number 4. The Wasp and Havoc. That's right, at one point two of the most complex Marvel family trees were intertwined via Janet Van Dyne and Alex Summers' relationship. These two got together during their shared time on the Avengers Unity Squad. Although they might seem like an unlikely couple, both of these two have some shared experiences in the sense that they both had some weird and awful relationships. So seeing them together kind of gave me hope that they could find something less weird and maybe more healthy together. Their relationship even resulted in the birth of Katie Summers, their daughter. Ready for the awkward part? Well, Kang ends up resetting the timeline to save the universe, which means that their time together and the birth of Katie basically gets wiped mostly clean, meaning Katie now never existed, although sadly both Janet and Alex do remember her existence. And Janet and Alex would also end up breaking up following Axis when Havoc ended up coincidentally shielded and therefore remained evil. Boo! Justice for Katie. Justice for this relationship. I love that Alex is like, it doesn't matter now because I'm evil, so I don't care that we were in a relationship. Because that's what evil people are like. Number 3. Wallace West and Raven. Wallace West and Raven have to be one of the weirdest couples we got out of the New 52. Why? Well, because Wally West II was considered to be much younger than Raven. Some weird stuff went down when we got the New 52, as this was meant to be a complete reset of the continuity. At least, that was kind of the idea. In reality, the New 52 was more like a reshuffling of the continuity, with some things staying the same and others changing, which really only made everything more confusing and awkward for readers. One such bizarre change involved the Teen Titans. We got a fresh new Teen Titans, mostly, except some people aged up in New 52, joining just the Titans team, while others seemed to remain eternally young, staying with the Teen Titans. One such member who got left behind was Raven. She was part of the Teen Titans team, despite her being an original member in the New Earth continuity of the Teen Titans, so she should have been older. This confused people. She ended up in a relationship with Wally, which seemed pretty controversial considering that Raven should in theory be much older than Wallace West. This was a fresh continuity, but it was really hard for people to forget the past, like back when Raven actually almost ended up dating the original Wally West, Wallace's older cousin. Wally seems to be implied to be at least a decade older than Wallace West II. Then add in the fact that Raven has played the role of mentor and Wallace has played the role of student, and yeah, it gets really weird. Number 2. Husk and Angel. I've talked about this one a few times and it doesn't get any less awkward the more that I do. In fact, I feel like every time we come back to it, it only gets more awkward for me. Husk is Paige Guthrie, the younger sibling of Sam Guthrie aka Cannonball, and one of the siblings I should say, as there are many Guthries out there. While Sam was introduced to us in the comics in 1982, Paige wouldn't appear until a couple years later, showing up in 1984. Angel, however, was first introduced in issue number 1 of the X-Men in 1963. Where he's initially implied to be of college age, but then of course it was later retconned that the original X-Men were teenagers when they joined up, more like high school age. Still, if Angel was around in the 60s as a teen, and Paige was introduced in the 80s as a teen, I think you see where I'm going with this. Initially, Paige dated Chamber for a while, but later she ended up as Angel's rebound following his breakup with Betsy. While also being seemingly much older than Paige, Warren would also sometimes treat her like she was a kid, and not really like his equal, which also made things even more awkward for readers. Also, there's the time that they were flying in the sky and some things happen. That was awkward. In front of Husk's mom too, which is also awkward. Number 1, Batwoman and Nocturna. Batwoman and Nocturna got together following Kate Kane's breakup with her then fiance Maggie Sawyer. In fact, Nocturna in the comics was the one who caused that breakup. Behind the scenes of the narrative, there was a lot more going on though, with Batwoman's marriage to her fiance being basically called off by DC, who didn't want to see it happen, arguing with the creative team behind the book, who did want to see it happen. So Nocturna isn't just bad for Batwoman because she full on manipulated her into letting her feed off of her and dump Maggie and date her, but because she also represented a bigger issue that was going on at the time. The relationship wasn't only abusive to start, but was also abusive throughout. From the start, with Talia also behaving in a very controlling manner, consistently jealous of Maggie, even after Kate had broken off that engagement. It was just a big yikes of a relationship that also highlighted more awkward and awful problems going on behind the scenes.
At number 10, we have the time when Mary Marvel literally uses Green Lantern as a weapon to beat up Troia. In Final Crisis number 3, an evil Mary Marvel is on a rampage, trying to take out both Green Lantern and Troia, a magical mirror duplicate of Wonder Woman. When Mary gets the jump on Green Lantern, we assume that's it for him and that she'll just move on to Troia. But no, for some reason the enraged former hero takes Green Lantern by the leg and just starts slamming his whole body against Troia, taking her out in the process. I feel badly for Green Lantern here. I mean, he was already unconscious, so like why did you have to Looney Tunes him like that? Okay. At number 9 is the time when the Wasp falls out of a tree after breaking a branch by accident. Back in the Silver Age, the female heroes were still in desperate need of updates. In this instance, the Wasp, one of the founding members of the Avengers, just flees a fight because back then she wouldn't have helped much, I guess, with the male writers in charge, and goes off to find a male hero to fix the conflict. But on her humble mission, she starts getting chased by a bird while she's in Wasp form. The bird chases her into a tree and forces her to change back into her human form to avoid getting eaten. But what she doesn't account for is that the branch in the tree isn't strong enough to hold her human body weight, so it breaks, and she falls and gets knocked unconscious. Too many dudes in the writer's room. At number 8 is the time when Robin gets trapped in a binding of hurdles and just gives up. Just around the 1964 Olympics, Diablo is attempting to sabotage the games, and the Teen Titans are called to go and prevent this from happening. They seem to be mostly successful until one of Diablo's henchmen throws a bunch of hurdles at Robin like they're hula hoops, and this traps him. So he yells out, "I'm ringed," and kind of just gives in. Even though it looks as though the hurdles are gonna eventually fall to his feet in a pile, allowing him to sort of step out and keep fighting. Kind of weird writing, but definitely embarrassing for the boy wonder who usually seems to keep his composure in sticky situations. At number 7 is the time when the Avengers get sent up in a pressurized elevator by Mole Man. While they're facing off against Mole Man down below Earth in his underground lair, things seem to be going well for the Avengers. I mean, obviously they would be, right? It's all the Avengers versus Mole Man. But what's weird and super embarrassing is that right when they seem like they're getting the upper hand, Mole Man tricks them into entering his pressurized elevator and then just sends them back up to the surface. The weirdest part is that when they get to the top, they don't even question whether or not they should go back down. They just kind of accept it as a win for themselves and move on, even though Mole Man wasn't quite defeated. So this is either a super embarrassing moment for the Avengers, or the writer's mom called him for supper and he had to wrap things up really quickly, suddenly. Either way, it deserves a spot on this list. All right, at number 6 is the time when Spider-Man punches himself in the face while facing off against Spot. Spot is a strange villain who has these portals all over his body which transport anything that enters them to exit out of another one of the holes also on his body. Did I explain that well? Anyway, Spider-Man goes for a punch in the gut on Spot, but his arm naturally enters a hole in his chest and pops out of the hole in Spot's face. This takes the full force of Spidey's punch and sends it flying right back for his own face, getting him right in the nose full force. Spider-Man is known to take humiliation with a grain of salt, given his fun, carefree philosophy, but it's still a funny and pretty embarrassing thing to see one of the more competent heroes facing in such a serious battle. At number 5 is the time when the Green Lantern gets neck chopped by Robin and almost dies. In All-Star Batman and Robin number 9, Green Lantern is lured into a room by Batman and Robin. But what makes this trap really effective against Green Lantern is that it's painted yellow, and the Green Lantern's power ring doesn't work against yellow things, apparently. So, at a huge disadvantage, Green Lantern is stuck, and Robin basically steals the ring right off his finger. Not Batman. Robin does this. A teenager who's basically only been a superhero for a week or so by this point. And it doesn't even end there. Robin then throat chops the Green Lantern so hard that he almost dies, and Batman has to perform a tracheotomy on their defeated foe. It's almost like Robin went a little too hard on this one. Batman's like, okay, whoa, you got him, hold on. Let me save this dude's life with a surgical procedure now. Poor Green Lantern. His life is saved, which is good, but not his dignity, at least not for a while. Okay, at number 4 is a fun one. It's the time when Eminem, yes, Eminem the rapper, beats up the Punisher and then shoots him a bunch of times. In Eminem/Punisher number 1, a comic book series I had no idea existed, but I'm so glad it does, Frank Castle is taking on a group of mobsters as usual when famous rapper Marshall Mathers appears out of nowhere and clocks him in the face with a Glock. He then starts firing rounds into the Punisher as he remarks at how easy it was to take down an anti-hero such as the Punisher. This is undoubtedly a hilarious encounter and probably a bit biased in favor of Eminem, because who's gonna write a comic book with Eminem's blessing and then have him be the one who gets his ass handed to him, right? It's sort of a meme moment, I think, but it's still part of the canon, so it happened. The Punisher survives, by the way, but he's gonna feel that one for a while. At number 3 is a very strange one, when Captain America dresses up as an old lady to infiltrate Nazi Germany. In this older issue, Steve and Bucky are trying to enter Nazi Germany undetected, so they decide to get into disguises. Bucky is dressed as a young schoolboy while Cap throws on a corset and a wig, and takes on an old woman persona. This plan is so dumb and not really like anything that Captain America ever did before this or has ever done since this. I think this was a time when these stories still had room for goofy, fun moments and heroes weren't being taken quite as seriously as they are today. Because these days, this sort of harebrained scheme wouldn't make it past the draft phase before being thrown out. I'm not sure if this is an embarrassing moment for Captain America or for the writers, but it's embarrassing for sure. Maybe embarrassing for both of them. At number 2 is another Spider-Man fail, but this one is closer to the top of the list because it's just a lot more humiliating than the punch to his own face. In this one, he's hit in the gonads with a slingshot during a live stream. In Superior Spider-Man number 6, a version of Spider-Man is chasing down Screwball, a villain that's obsessed with the internet, as well as Jester, Marvel's knockoff Joker. Finally, as Spider-Man is encountering Jester and Screwball, the battle is being live streamed for the world to see. As everyone's waiting in anticipation for Spidey's typical one-liners and quick quips, they get something else instead. After Spider-Man accidentally punches Screwball in the chest, he feels badly, apologizing for the unfortunate accident. But in this already unfortunate situation is right when Jester charges up a slingshot and fires it right at Spidey's downstairs region for the world to see. And then they throw a bunch of paint-filled balloons at his face, which just sort of adds insult to injury. Brutal. Finally, at number 1 is another hit to the groin that's somehow even crazier than this one that I just described. It's when the Punisher shoots off Wolverine's nether region entirely with a shotgun. As the Punisher and Wolverine catch each other on basically the same mission, the Punisher decides that he wants to work alone without distractions. So, being the Punisher that he is, he decides he needs to do some more punishing and takes a shot at the coveted hero's no-no zone. I'm really running out of child-friendly terms here, but we know what I'm trying to say. Anyway, the Punisher then gets into a frickin' steamroller and runs Wolverine over. I'm thinking like, where was the fight in ya, Logan? He absolutely took you to church on this one. So embarrassing. Tough to watch.